You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, a podcast, if you like that sort of thing. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching Disaster. It had a story by Ron Jarvis and Philip A. Scorza, a teleplay by Ronald D. Moore, and was directed by Gabrielle Beaumont. It first aired the week of October 21st, 1991. James, do you have a brief synopsis?
Do you like disaster movies like the Poseidon Adventure or the Towering Inferno? Then you'll like Disaster, because it's basically that, but on Star Trek. The ship hits a weird space rock or something and loses all power. Picard gets stuck in a turbo lift with some children. Troy is left in command on the bridge with a helpful O'Brien and stroppy Rowe. Worf must deliver Keiko's baby. Data and Riker try to get to engineering, while Crusher and Geordi also get given a pointless plot for some reason. Picard learns how to be Captain Von Trapp, while Troy learns that being captain means making hard decisions. Really, it seems like she's not been paying attention.
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before. What did you make of it?
Well, I watched it and I thought, I bet a lot of people like this one. And I did message you two as I watched it saying, is this episode considered a good one? Well, this and Silicon Avatar. But I do feel like, because of the way we record these and double banking this with having watched Silicon Avatar beforehand, Silicon Avatar had sort of drained my batteries somewhat going into this, which is on me. It's just the way that we record this. Kind of like that episode, I thought it was fine. I thought it was good, but actually kind of like a disaster movie as well. I find when I think about it, I can pick out bits and I can go, yeah, the Worf delivering the baby bit, that was interesting, and Picard hates kids. But I feel like I'm picking out moments rather than a whole. And I think that's probably just how I've come into the episode rather than a problem with the episode itself, though.
I think it's TNG in a particular mode. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily my favourite mode, because I like an episode to be about something. This episode is not about anything.
No, it's very much that. There isn't that linking theme. It's, again, like the last episode, like Silicon Avatar, it's a series of things that happen, except that these are all happening concurrently.
It's like the type of plot you would now get on Lower Decks.
Yeah, maybe something like that. I mean, it's Star Trek in movie parody mode, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, oh, here's a plot. Yeah, we can apply this on a Star Trek show. It doesn't have a second level to it, but I suppose it's interesting having unusual pairings of characters or unusual combinations of characters in unusual situations. And I think that's basically the setup. What if Worf had to deliver a baby? What if Troy was captain of the Enterprise? What if Picard was stuck in a turbo lift with 3 children and no toilet facilities? What if Geordi and Crusher were stuck with a green flame and lots of barrels?
And I think that highlights it. The problem is that some of those things are inherently more interesting than others. That's perhaps the biggest problem. If you were looking for a problem there, that's probably it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a bit bitty.
I feel like if you were to reduce it down to just part of the plot elements, you made the episodes just Troy on the bridge and Picard in the turbo lift, it would then become more of a character study and would kind of take away from the episode, I feel. I actually think it's refreshing not to have, a big moral lesson of the week or having to analyse deeply into the makeup of the characters. It's shallow, but I think they've earned a rest.
Daniel Oborn on our Twitter has said, it's not great Star Trek, but it's a great episode of television. I think there might be something in that. I find it very entertaining. Like, I think this, it works. It does what it does. And and like you say, James, like you could actually do this in that way where Troy's stuck on the bridge, and it's Troy, O'Brien, and they don't know if anyone else is alive, and maybe everyone else is dead. You could do that sort of really locked-in bottle show. Troy doesn't sense any life signs. Maybe they're surrounded by some weird space cloud, and that might be interesting. And maybe the dramatic tension is more of a, oh, we have to separate the saucer section, is more, if we do this, everyone else will die, kind of thing. But that again, that's a moral dilemma type thing. That's what you could have done. I like all the plots. I think it's light.
Well, there's nothing bad here, and I think the sort of vague criticism we were mentioning before is more an inherent thing with the format of disaster movies than it is anything that they're actually doing here. It's more the format that they are playing into, and a lot of that's just going to come down to what your feelings on a disaster movie are, really.
And I think there's always going to be the bits in the disaster movie where you might be with a particular plot or story or grouping, and you're like, oh no, get back to that one. And I would say the weakest is undoubtedly the Geordie and Crusher. We're stuck, we're getting poisoned by radiation, and we've got some chemicals that are going to explode as well. It's double peril. And what's the solution? Oh, we can open the window. It sort of does a job, but I'd say it's the least compelling. And especially, we don't spend that much time in 10 Forward with Worf. I mean, the Riker and Data plot is absolutely played for laughs. We're crawling down a Jeffries tube. Oh, we get trapped from the back. Oh, we've got trapped by the front. And then it's like, use my body as a conductor to break a circuit and take my head off. I mean, it's very much, it feels very Red Dwarf, I would say, almost, that, carrying around Data's head and hooking it up to a computer.
Yes, mixed with duck soup.
I definitely did think about duck soup while rewatching this.
That's not a great compliment.
It all turns out that Data had caused all this because he was jealous of Geordie hanging around with Crusher.
Those artificial life forms and their emotions. I guess interesting on the bridge, we don't have any of our regulars other than Troy. We've got our recurring O'Brien who's there, and then Ro, our new character. Were you pleased to see her back again?
I mean, she was certainly present. She's fine. I mean, I'm trying to think how to put this without sounding like a dick, but so I might as well just lean into it, to be honest. It's not a vehicle that presents anyone with a great deal to latch onto, really. You're just kind of seeing the stereotypes of the characters.
I feel like she's serving the same purpose that Worf would in that situation, which kind of makes sense and will feel a bit redundant at this point. When we're not dealing with the Bajoran plight, she doesn't really serve a purpose as part of the recurring cast.
I think it's a real big problem when you've had an episode built around a character, which you had with her very recently, and then they're in just to be a random antagonist against our regular character.
It's like watching Rise of Skywalker and seeing Rose Tico have nothing to do, having been integral in the previous film. You
would never say use Barclay in this way. If you're bringing back Dwight Schultz, then he's going to have an episode built around him. And it's maybe quite strange to have had that character that had an episode built around them, and then you've got, they could be ensign anybody, basically.
Although I quite like that idea of throwing Barclay into the mix here and just having that character that's just messing things up, and there's a comedic element and everyone just getting very annoyed about it because it's a very serious moment.
Or what if we occasionally just cut to Barclay and he's on the holodeck and just doesn't realise anything is happening?
Yeah, that would be quite fun. But maybe there was more opportunity for stuff like that in this episode. But
it's not without its comedy. I mean, the whole baby thing is very much leaning heavily into the comedy, and I think the Picard stuff is trying to, but it doesn't quite work for me on that level in the same way. But I think, again, that portrays more my feelings on disaster movies, that I prefer them when there's that second element to it. So a comedic disaster film is more interesting to me than a sort of what's a very sincere and earnest disaster film? The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nah, couldn't give a toss. I think that pretty much sums it up for me.
I guess they play that Picard with the children. Obviously, that's a well-established early TNG fact that, Captain Picard doesn't like children, he doesn't get on with children. So you have this situation where you put them in a lift with three fairly... I mean, I wonder why it was three of them. Two of them seem pretty much the same character. You know, you put him in a turbo lift with three children, he's injured, and he needs to work out how to communicate with children, and he just turns them into a crew. He blows his whistle and gets them to line up. There's some decent jokes there as well. We need a climbing song. The laughing Vulcan and his dog. I mean, that's right up my street in terms of a joke. That's good.
Is the 90s the last decade where you'd get a story revolving around a middle-aged man being trapped in a lift that no one can see with three kids? It feels like that might not get off the landing pad these days.
I mean, although if you think about it, Voyager had a middle-aged man in a relationship with a 2-year-old woman. So, I mean, there was some strange stuff going on in that decade.
The legacy of Gene Roddenberry lives on.
I'm fairly certain one of the characters says something about needing to do something with the shaft as well, so that doesn't help matters.
I don't know if you would get dialogue referring to a shaft anymore.
No,
that.
Certainly not with kids.
No. Let's all climb the shaft. And it's hard not to giggle, because I am a very immature man. It could be very dangerous to have children in your show. They could be very annoying, and I'm like, they don't have a lot to them, but they're fine. Like that, I think that plot works as well, possibly because it's slightly amusing. Like it's quite weird, isn't it? Like you're the officer in charge of radishes, and it's like, Chief O'Brien had been vying for that one for years.
Overlooked again.
What would have been great is if they get out of the shaft and there's a radish-related emergency that only Patterson can solve.
Yeah, I like that.
I do, but I feel that the only radish-related emergency is probably going to involve the rectum, and I don't really want to give thoughts to that.
You always take it back there, don't you?
Well, yeah, that's yeah. Where else would one insert?
And that's how you bring Barclay into the episode.
He slipped and fell. What are the chances? How do you fit a condom on a radish?
I wish I was never made the executive officer in charge of radishes.
Mr. Broccoli. No, Mr. Radish now.
What else is there? The 10 forward plot. I mean, again, it's sort of comedy lines, isn't it? It's, you are 10 centimeters dilated, you may now give birth. Like,
yeah.
That's a great Worf line. I mean, there's almost nothing to this. There's like, 2 scenes where it's like, we're wondering about giving out blankets, and then it's, I'm giving birth now. And, then you come back to that. But what more do you want to do with that?
Oh, no. I think, to be honest, those 2 scenes are my favourite of the episode. The only thing I would say is that they feel a bit more like they've been transplanted from, say, a screwball comedy.
Yeah.
But I'm all for some laughs.
It's Worf, very funny, gets to deliver some good lines, saying giving birth is not convenient at this point. You could lift those lines and put them into a sort of a modern comedy quite easily. it's fun, it's froth, it's kind of light. So I find Troy, she's such an underdeveloped character that here, she sits on the bridge every single day. On either side of the commands team, she is herself a lieutenant commander, and here it's made out like she literally doesn't know anything and has never been in space before.
Well, how are you going to support your most undeveloped of the main characters? Who can you put them with that'll really help bring them out? Well, I know. How about one of the even more undeveloped characters, and one who's only shown up once previously? Genius.
And I suppose they do play very classic demon and angel kind of. Chief O'Brien is like, I'm full of suggestions. I think we should protect the crew. And then Ro is, yeah, well, actually you're going to blow up the ship and kill everyone. Maybe we should just do this really bad thing and let them all die. So, a bit basic, but it's just, I find it really frustrating when she's like, is a quantum filament this? And like, she just stands there and gets talked at for most of it, and it's just, I don't know, it's not particularly satisfying in any way, because as much as she is a counsellor, you don't get that rank based on nothing. She will have been through Starfleet training and will have some knowledge, given, again, she sits in the command position on a starship. It's making it that she's not a bridge officer when she is a bridge officer is, I don't know, it seems a bit reductive on the character. It feels not particularly fair, because no matter what, it is a command situation, and someone in that position wouldn't have to be explained to that she was the ranking officer.
It is definitely unfair when they inform her that she's in charge and dark foreboding music plays over it.
It's like, well, I don't even wear a uniform. I just turn up in a catsuit and nobody said anything about it to me, so I assume it's fine. Like, obviously she does the right thing, and maybe she's doing the what would Picard do type game, but it doesn't feel like a satisfying arc, especially at the end when Ro says, I'm sorry, you were right, you made the right choices, and she goes, well, I easily could have made the wrong ones. Oh, okay, what a great lesson we all learned there.
Today's lesson, it's all 50-50 really.
I don't know what I want at the end, because the summing up is basically kind of, it's the Picard plot. The children come back to the bridge. Everything's fine again. We're going to a starbase for repairs. And there's no point, like, do all the plots or the characters intersect. It's very much like, these were all filmed on different days, on different stages, and like you said, it doesn't become a cohesive whole, ever. Obviously, the stuff that Troy's doing affects the Riker stuff, but the rest of it's all just, they are their own little bits.
Data and Riker were filmed in front of a live studio current.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know if I want them all sitting around a table at the end and going, well, I was trapped with a hostile green flame, and I moved 7 barrels.
You think that's bad? I had to live with these kids. You think that's bad? I had to live with Troy. Ba-da-da-dun-da-dun-dun. Hey! Da-da-da-da-da-da-da!
I mean, it pretty much did end on a very silly sitcom line.
It's very earnest, isn't it? It feels like it's from a different era in the best possible way. And I guess that's what I like about TNG. It's just, it's very sincere. There's no badness in it, really, other than, the horrifically maimed bridge officer at the start.
Somebody's
God,
died.
yeah, that explosion. That's a Peter Ragg special, that is.
I mean, like, you just sort of go, what happened? What happened to her? How did she get like that? And it's like, oh, these exploding consoles again. It's like, you want to get them looked at.
They appear to be full of stone.
Yeah. We fill them with rocks, because that's the best way. Like, they actually, the whole electronic element is just contained on the surface, but just to weight them down, they just fill them with exploding rocks.
Cowboys, Ted. They're a bunch of cowboys.
They have an idea. they do it pretty well. There's a bunch of character combinations that work. You make use of Keiko O'Brien effectively. I mean, miracles will never stop.
Yeah, again, going back to where we started this, it's difficult to be in-depth and analytical about it because the format doesn't support that. It is very much surface. That doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable, but there isn't a huge depth to explore. It's just much more sort of, don't you like seeing Data's head off with look, it's a slightly unconvincing effect. We're gonna pass a lot of electricity through it. That was fun, wasn't it? Let's move on to the next thing. Here, look, it's a comedy sketch. Yeah, fine.
And I think in a season with 26 episodes, there's definitely a place for an entry like this.
Compared to finishing the last episode with, you were wrong for killing that thing and your dead son's never going to forgive you. I mean, it is a change of mood, certainly. It's like going to a disco and having the Birdie song followed by something off Pink Floyd's The Final Cut.
I like that about Star Trek Next Generation. I like that it can be on full-on sitcom mode. It can be on kind of action movie mode, and it can be on moral dilemma, science fiction problem mode. I think a lot of the casts maybe get criticised in the Next Generation. Certainly by the time you get to the movies, you're like, oh, this is not a movie level cast, but it's a really versatile cast. They can, they can do the bits. Like the characters maybe aren't always the best written, but I think like the cast itself, just the combination of those characters, it works. And this is an ensemble show, and that you can split up all the characters, you can put them in different situations. Each plot is fairly compelling. They have enough charisma to hold their own, and I can't complain about it as an episode. It really, in any way, it's enjoyable. It's not a bottle show really, because they've got a sort of some guest stars, but it's very contained. You can do an episode on only standing sets with not a great deal of extras, no outside sets, no location filming, nothing like that. The lights turned off for most of it to save power. Well done to everyone involved from far in the future.
A solid 1-star review.
Yeah. Disaster. Basically fine. The spoilest.
I would argue that this is above basically fine.
It is above basically fine, but that's the joke. Should Chief O'Brien have met his child? Did that plot need to be resolved?
It would be great if just from this point, every time he went to meet his child, something got in the way and he never got to meet it every time.
Wouldn't it have been great if instead of saying it looks like Chief O'Brien, he said it looks like Commander Riker? Missed opportunity there. Right, we've run out of things to say. So we will say, I don't know, maybe 4 more things in quick fire, and then we will let you get on with your day.
Quick fire.
So we venture to Memory Beta, which is the repository of all Star Trek that isn't proper Star Trek. And we venture into the continuing adventures of Marissa Flores, Picard's new number 1. You may have been wondering what happens to her after her adventures in Disaster. Well, approximately 1.5 years after the adventure with the quantum filament, she was living aboard the USS Chamberlain after her father had been reassigned. And the Chamberlain encountered a temporal hole, which caused the crew to become frozen in time. And Marissa, due to an accidental exposure to chronoton particles, was immune to the temporal hole's effects. and she was able to send a series of text communications to Captain Picard so he could mount a rescue. And during the course of these messages, Marissa revealed to Captain Picard that she'd cheated on her science fair project in an effort to impress her estranged mother, and that she'd been undeserving of the prize of meeting Captain Picard. And Picard later assured her that she still had his respect. So somebody wrote that story. Somebody decided that Marissa needs a continuing adventure, and that she should have secret text communications with Picard.
I mean, this is uncited on Memory Alpha, but plausible. The idea of having Ro and O'Brien working together was due to the fact they were both planning to transfer to Deep Space Nine, and the producers wanted to see how well the two characters would work together. While O'Brien indeed did move to the new series, the character of Kieran and Reese was created to replace Ro when actress Michelle Forbes declined the offer. I can buy that, except, they didn't really give them anything to work with.
Deferring to the demonstrable dirge that is the Nitpicker's Guide, we are offered an insight into Phil's home life here, if you'd be so inclined. I mean, if you're not, I'll read it anyway. He says, when Picard and the children finally find a turbolift door they can open, Picard's waist is level with the deck floor. Picard heaves the top half of his body onto the floor and then yanks and pulls himself the rest of the way out. I burst out laughing the second time I watched this episode. My wife gave me one of those looks.
Was it a look of regret? This was the last episode aired before Gene Roddenberry's death on 24th of October 1991. In the scene where Picard makes Marissa his first officer, there are two small but visible holes in her collar before she receives the pips. This indicates that either the earlier portions of this scene before she received them were reshot, or that her collar was pierced in advance to ensure the pips could be placed. It's Phil Farrand been editing Memory Alpha.
I would be shocked if Phil Farrand hasn't found that error. Has he mentioned that?
So in the Nitpicker's Guide, Phil says, as Picard discusses their predicament with the children, he decides to make them his crew. To this end, he drafts the eldest child, a girl, as... Was that necessary? As his first officer. Picard removes two of his pips, open brackets. Yes, that's what those dots on his collar are called, close brackets. No one was disputing that. And attaches them to her collar. However, in the close-ups leading to this exchange, two holes are clearly visible on the girl's collar. The holes are not present when Troy introduces the children to Picard on the bridge. They simply appear in close-ups as the girl agrees to join Picard's crew. Coincidentally, the holes are located precisely where Picard places the pips. Either the creators did the long shot first and then the close-ups, or they had to do multiple takes on close-ups. In either case, the pips were placed on her collar and then removed at least once.
Boy, I hope somebody was fired for that blunder.
Michael Pillar, he generally liked the episode. He thought it was a fun show. It achieved everything we set out to do. Ron wrote a nice script. I loved the stuff with David's head disembodied. It had a real pace and rhythm. It didn't reach the upper echelon of episodes for me because it didn't really have a mystery or science fiction base to it. Which I agree with all of that. Me and Michael Pillar, we often agree on things. However, he regretted the direction that Ro Laron took in the episode, gave her the role of the disbeliever who had nowhere to go, but lose in the end because she didn't believe Troy. I think, as I wrote in a memo, it would have been much better if she'd been around a year with some victories before we threw her right into that situation to look foolish. And I didn't like the moment where she had to come back and say, which is almost the same arc as that character in the opening who apologised to Data. Gee, you were right, Counselor, and I was wrong, and I respect you. To me, after Troy made the right decision in a crisis, Ro's character, and I'm not sure if anyone would agree with me on this, would have said, you still could have killed us, and I still think I was right, and you're just lucky it came out this way. That's the way I would have ended it with her. The bridge sequence was my least favourite part of the show, because it seemed very predictable to me.
Fair. Discussing the setups of the episode, Ron Moore says, I put Picard in the turbolift shaft because I wanted to make it rain in there. I've been reading about NASA's gigantic vehicle assembly building at the Kennedy Space Center. Thrilling. The one that they used to assemble the Apollo and Saturn rockets and the space shuttle. At the time they built it, it was the largest interior space that had ever been enclosed in terms of volume, and they'd had a problem with clouds forming near the ceiling and rain would actually come down. The engineers had to figure out how to deal with it. I had this notion that in a really tall turbolift and enclosed space, that when the power went out, it might start to rain. The danger would be with lighting lancing through the tube. Unfortunately, anything that has to do with water on the set is an enormous pain in the ass and too cost prohibitive and takes forever, so we couldn't do it. But that's why Picard's in the turbo shaft. He wanted to get Patrick Stewart wet, so put him in a big shaft, and then couldn't do it. But the shaft had been erected by that point, and so despite a lack of wetness, they proceeded anyway to the climax.
Are you proud of yourself?
Yes. I feel it's the best thing I've achieved this week.
Thank you once again for listening. We will be back again soon, and we'll be talking about the game, the return of Wesley Crusher. So we're looking forward to that. Hope you'll join us then. Goodbye.
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 Exactly. To be honest, I feel we're underrepresented. I mean, Wikipedia doesn't say what we said about an episode when it's quoting the review section. So if anybody would like to maybe quote us on Wikipedia, please make that your life goal.
You can just put the quote first contact basically fine for every episode, really.
That would be so good. Star Trek Podcast First Contact described this as basically fine. Best of both worlds one.